After the Prophet began to preach openly, he began to encounter the aggressive attitudes of the polytheists. Meccan polytheists made fun of the Prophet and tried to humiliate him. They accused him of lying and slander and called him a poet, magician, or even an oracle. They were not satisfied with this. They also disturbed him on multiple incidences. One included putting a tripe on his back, which is an animal's stomach, while he was praying in the Kaaba. Since the Prophet was from the tribe of Quraysh, they could not touch him or hurt him, but they were torturing the other Muslims who were weak and poor, and among them were slaves. They didn't want these other people to believe in the message of the Prophet. When the persecution increased and the first martyrs were given, the Prophet did not want the Muslims to stay in Mecca, so he ordered emigration. After the first migration to Abyssinia, the Muslims migrated to another city, Medina. Why was there emigration to Medina though? Let's talk about Medina a little, which is also called Yathrib. It is located north of Mecca. It is a region inhabited by Jews as well as Arabs. The Prophet conveyed Islam to the pilgrims who came to Mecca from Yathrib. A group of Yathrib people converted to Islam and then returned to Yathrib. This group mentioned about the new religion, Islam, and Muslims to the Yathrib people. After a while, the Prophet sent Musab bin Umair to Yathrib. Musab's 1-year effort resulted in 2 great chiefs of Yathrib, Sa'd bin Muaz and Usayd bin Hudayr, to convert to Islam, which then led to a large acceptance of Islam in that society. After a year, the number of Yathribs who believed in Islam had increased. With the second allegiance of Aqaba, the Prophet was invited to Yathrib. They promised to protect and watch him there. After these promises, the Muslims in Mecca began to secretly migrate to Medina, because when the polytheists found out about this, they imprisoned them. Umar bin Khattab carried out the first openly declared emigration. After praying 2 rakats in the Kaaba, he challenged the polytheists who were there, openly saying that he would migrate to Medina. The polytheists did not try to stop or bring back Umar because they were afraid of his challenge. The fact that the majority of Muslims settled in Medina and Islam began to gain strength there frightened the Meccan polytheists. They were worried that one day Muhammad might go to Medina and pose a danger to them with his companions. They gathered in Darun Nadwa to take a precaution against this. Since the subject they were going to discuss was extremely important, they do not invite anyone from the Bani Hashim tribe except Abu Lahab. They do not allow anyone into the discussion that would not be trusted. After long negotiations in Darun Nadwa, it was decided that they would kill the Prophet, which was Abu Jahl's idea. The assassination would be carried out by a group of musketeers in which each person would represent each of the Quraysh tribes. Thus, it would prevent the Bani Hashim tribe from beginning a blood feud. While the polytheists were making plans to kill the Prophet, Gabriel informed the Prophet. The Prophet hid in the cave of Sawr for 3 days with his friend Abu Bakr. The polytheists found Ali while trying to kill the Prophet. They searched and arrived at the cave where the Prophet was hiding. However, Allah had covered the gates of the cave with spider webs. Then they were convinced that there was no one in the cave due to the spider web that they had found. They then began to search elsewhere. During the 3 days in the cave, the Meccans' control of the region had decreased. As promised, the guide Abdullah bin Uraykit came to Sawr with camels. Abu Bakr's freedman Amr bin Fuhaira had been included in the convert group, and they set off towards the coastal road. They tried not to be caught by the polytheists as they traveled through steep mountains and sometimes through deserts. Despite this, they were followed and interrogated from time to time. Muslims in Medina had learned that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, left Mecca, but when he was late, they began to worry about him. For this reason, they went to the Hijra location, which is located on the way to Mecca, and waited until the sun rose. They did the same on Monday, the 8th of Rabiul Awwal, the 20th of September, 622. but then they began returning. However, after a short while, a Jewish girl who was on the roof of a 3-story house saw a convoy coming towards Medina. She realized that it was the expected guests and shouted out to everyone. Right after, the Muslims rushed the Hijra to meet the Messenger of God. The Messenger of God, who was greeted by a large, enthusiastic crowd, found a good way not to offend those people who invited him to their home. He demanded the release of his camel, Qaswa, and said that he would be a guest to the house where Qaswa sat down. When the camel sat down on an empty plot of land where Masjid al-Nabawi would be built later, the Prophet became the guest of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, the owner of the nearest house. After staying there for about 7 months, he moved to the rooms built next to the mosque. Just because they believed in Allah, the immigrants had to leave their homeland, family, lovers, all their material and spiritual savings, their homes and shelters behind. In the 41st verse of Surah An-Nahl, it says, "As for those who emigrated in the cause of Allah after being persecuted, we will surely bless them with a good home in this world, but the reward of the hereafter is far better if only they knew." Allah promises them great rewards. In the verse, Allah says that He is the protector of the immigrants. The Muslims who migrated to Medina with the Prophet were called Muhajir, and those who welcomed and hosted them in Medina were called Ansar. The Prophet declared the Muhajirs and Ansar as brothers. The people of Medina shared their properties, houses, and jobs with their fellow refugees. Thus, a great brotherhood was established. Allah mentions Muhajir and Ansar in the 100th verse of Surah At-Tawbah. As for the foremost, the first of the emigrants, Muhajirs, and the helpers, Ansars, and those who follow them in goodness, Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Him. And He has prepared for them gardens under which rivers flow, to stay there forever and ever. That is the ultimate triumph. Allah praises the Ansar and Muhajir. After the migration, the Prophet changed the name of Yathrib to Medina Munawwar. He declared the Islamic State and sent messengers to the surrounding cities and countries. From there on out, Muslims were under the protection of a state. After the Hijra, Islam then spreaded much more easily. After establishing the Islamic State, the Prophet prepared the Medina contract in order to put an end to the violent internal conflicts between the Aus tribe and the Khazraj tribe, the tribes in Medina. For this purpose, the rights and responsibilities of all of them were established in order to gather the Muslim, Jewish, and pagan communities in Medina as a single community under the name of the Ummah. The agreement envisaged political unity, social solidarity, common defense, and a confederative structure. After the Hijra to Medina, the Muslims migrated to many cities, countries, and distant lands to convey Islam. They went far from their homes and loved ones to spread the religion of Islam to many parts of the world. Their main aim was to win Allah's approval. Hijra, in its broadest sense, is to emigrate and travel from one place to another. But how will people who are unable to emigrate do this? The essence of Hijra is to live and explain religion better, to turn from something that Allah dislikes to something He loves, or to turn off a television program that Allah is displeased with and engage in something that pleases Him. The important thing, as the Quran puts, is to leave a position where we are weak and to find a position where we can hold on to Allah's religion more firmly. Everyone is able to make their own emigrations in their lives.